Right then, 2025 is here. Happy New Year, Mark.
Yes, humbug, Stuart. Yes, happily humbugging.
Well, I mean, for me, 2025 is the year of collaborations, and this was the first cab off the rank. So I'm very excited. I'm coming out of the blocks hard, trying to hit that sort of first 40 meters, and try and see if I can't get ahead and stay ahead. But I'm definitely re-energized and refreshed, having had a little bit of time off, albeit not a lot, but enough, just to sort of re-energize. We need to do a one-to-one PDS on me around weight, fitness, health. So that's another conversation for another day. But yes, I definitely need to focus on that. But anyway. How are you? And I'm looking forward to our conversation today. And you can tell me how you are, and then you can introduce our conversation topic.
So I'm awesome. I planned my rest day around the day the gym closed, and the rest was business as usual. Nothing really changes for me. I live with purpose, do what I enjoy doing, put real intensity and purpose into what I'm doing, and that's what recharges my batteries. So all good, my end. I'm actually Sunday. I'm off to Portugal to work with Edge Golf College again with their students. So I'm there for a week and using the PDS, upskilling them. Second visit, so we'll be building on interdependence. First visit was independence. So we're building the rule of three, the ARP, which links us beautifully into this, and how we load pressure using ARP to set where our capability limits are, and then know how to stretch them. So that will be for them next week. So excited to get stuck in with them again.
So ARP, introduce us to this concept of ARP.
So the ARP stands for the action review process. Now, this has been an evolution over decades. I remember the when we went on the training with me, you did, don't know how long ago now. Was it 15 years ago? Maybe something like that. Crazy.
Don't even think about
this. This wasn't in the frame as it is now. So I call it the action review process. However, if you're listening and you don't know the PDS language yet, and you haven't involved yourself in the principles, then this is live decision-making for an athlete, a person, a manager, irrelevant of who you are, whether you're in the fire brigade, the police, military, doesn't matter. But also it's a way to analyze post-action also. So for you itself, in choice, execution, judgment, post, but also for an athlete live in the moment, whether that's a golf player, football, rugby player, and a business manager, if they're saying, I'm not sure why that person did that, instead of telling them what they did wrong and how to put it right, or ask 20 questions and getting nothing back, there's a framework that we've all shared that allows me to understand where the source of an issue was, to help me support them in their growth without micromanaging them, but also recognize where the success came from. So for me, it's a game changer in the whole of PDS. It runs through it similar to the rule of three, where it's a framework that you build from. But the action review process is the game changer in what we want of people. We want people to be able to be confident and competent in making good judgment live on their own and in a collaboration, but also be able to live review and conclude, not waiting till afterwards to watch a video or have a chat with coach or someone else or manager. In the moment, can I review my choice and execution so I can adapt live? And that for me is the biggest difference between this and traditional coaching.
So there's a lot to this, and I know it's going to take us a little while to unpack it. But there's three things that you talked about there, which was the sort of prior to action, post-action, and in action. We'll probably unpick those a little bit, but I could see initially, I was thinking, there's elements of this that I'll do in the pre, and there's elements of this I'll do in the post, albeit not as tightly and succinctly as you've articulated them. So there was a really good reminder for me around some of those elements, and sort of reflecting on my own process and the elements that I would use within my own process. The bit that I was really interested about was the inaction. Now, we can probably come on to that a little bit later on, but maybe if you just go through the stages and the steps, and then I can just chime in on some of the, I guess, minor modifications that perhaps I've taken to ARP, because in my context it works for me in a particular way. Still keeping the framework, honest to the framework, but just doing things, little hacks and shortcuts, perhaps. I know you probably won't like that, but they just work for me in my context.
Well, what we do is I challenge you on them, Stuart, in relation to the situation, to identify what you need to add and what you need to take away. Because in my opinion, there's nothing needs to add, nothing should be taken away, but then it's down to the context of your interpretation of each of the stages, which is the important element. So I could throw this up on the screen with this crazy technology if it works. Let's commit to, wow, check that out.
Look at
magic and everything.
that.
So that looks crazy, I know, bear with us. In the members area, this is broken down, so it won't just be one massive slide. I delve in to each singular element, then put them all together and then show how they fit within everything else. But just for the purpose of this, I'm just going to run through it in a simple way. So the green on the left, the first 4 boxes are your decision-making boxes. The grey or silver, that's the 5th and 6th box you'll see there, is your actual execution, the action. Then the next 2 boxes on the right, the last 2, is your live evaluation reviewing. And that's the main elements, but there is a process of closure without overthinking, and then be present again to what's next. So if I just went through the first 4, Stuart, on the decision making in a very simple, clean way, and see how they all relate and see how they all impact each other. So if you're watching this and you're a coach, if you're watching this a parent, an athlete, someone in business, a school teacher, makes no difference. Contextualize this to a situation in your life as they go through it. So first element is always state. So when I talk about state, is the mood, the state, the emotional point you're in at the moment. So be aware of it and manage it to be acceptable. And the reason why I say that is, if you're an athlete on a pitch, on a court, wherever you may be in golf, and you are still thinking about you've just missed or conceded or a bad shot, whatever it may be, the chances are your state is not effective, is not acceptable. Now, if your state's unacceptable, that's going to impact every single one of the decision-making stages after that. And that's why that's number 1 first. When that's acceptable, and we can get acceptable, we go then into scanning. And when I use scanning, it's about collating data. So if you're a accountant on a screen, you've got 4 or 5 elements open and you're thinking, hang on a minute, how's my state present? Let's minimize these 3. It's this one I'm on now. I'm scanning. I'm looking up for all the relevant data on a screen. For a footballer, a rugby player, a basketball player, that is now scanning for the important relative data. So if you're outside, weather could be a consideration, but particularly where your players are at base level, where the opposition is at base level, where the pitch court side edges are, where there's space, where there's opportunity threats. Once you get skilled at this, you'll be able to start spotting more texture. Golf play would be, where's the ball, where's the surrounding, where's the rough, where's the hazards, where's the wind coming from? So it's just a data capture, and you're not making decisions at this point. You're just collating the data. Now, important for a manager or a boss is this is where we need to understand, hang on, before I make judgment, have I collated all the data? Have I made a good information capture before I start making judgment or decisions? So once we've done that, the next element is looking at all the options. And when I talk about all the options, it's about actually understanding what are all my options without dismissing one before I've even started. And if you've ever played golf, one of the biggest problems with players in golf is they're already deciding what option they're going to choose before they've actually looked at the data. And this is where people can really go for the crazy shots and they muck up, and then there is a negative spiral. So the options is right. What are all the options? Now, the next one is where I see a lot of people trip up in business, in sport, in education, coaching, management, is identifying the influences of variables. So if you think about it, options is identifying all of them. The influencers now are how we eliminate options. Well, it's not that because of this. It's not that because of this. It's not that because of this. Okay, I'm left with one or two. Which is the one based on my capability, and if it's a team, the best capability of us in competence comes up. I'm choosing this one. So it's that understanding of not cutting one of those short. So once we get to that point, now we've got a choice. We can start with confidence, without doubt. We can start putting intention and intensity into, which moves into the execution. So that's the decision-making phase, Stuart.
Right. Keep going through, and then I'll circle back to all of it, and then we can start to unpick some of this.
Okay, so we cannot. Here's a really simple rule that you can teach anyone in management, in business, and teaching in sport: is you don't commit unless you've decided mentally you're going to commit. And what I mean by that is, do not have two ideas in your head, or do not have fear of failure in your head when you've decided on an option. The whole point of the variable influences is to get to a point and go, this is the right option based on need-centered, which again, listen to the Christmas episode and we really delve into that side of things. Right now, this is it. Once I've made that, I back myself. I back myself with intention of clarity of purpose, and I go for it 100%. And that's we're looking at, I'm using a word in here, as you'll see, tactical, technical. That's basically the technical will be just that movement action you're going to do. The tactical would be, okay, so what are the options? What's the strategy we're going to use? So in essence, you've decided on a strategy, and then you're going to execute it, which is those two boxes. And it's executing without doubt, without fear, without limiting beliefs. Well, I might not do this, but I'll give it a try. None of that nonsense. I'm committing to this. This is what it is, and I'm going for it. To give yourself your best chance of success based on your present capability. Now, once you've done that, the first question we ask ourselves before we have earned the right to review is, did I commit? Now, this is another area I spend hours with my clients, Stuart, going into at all levels, is understanding what commitment actually means. And we may talk about on this, but we could do a whole episode on what commitment actually means. So if the answer is, have I committed? The answer is no. I haven't earned the right to review choice execution, because the conclusion is, next time, commit. There's no point in reviewing something you haven't committed to. It's a waste of energy and time, and it's not giving you useful data. So if the answer is yes, I've committed, then I review separately, how was the choice, how was the execution? From that, you're going to get to a conclusion of, next time and it might be I'm nailing it, I'm going to do the same again. Or it's that next time, if that situation comes up, I'm going to do this. Or next time if it's a team dynamic. So easy example is if it's in basketball, soccer, any of these, on the pitch or the court now, if it's the next time I need to make sure I effectively communicate next time so we understand next situation, these are the adjustments, or we're nailing it, let's do that again next time. So there's a team collective. Now, in training, we need to practice what words are we going to use where the people can hear that and understand what does that mean to them and what are they going to do next time. That's another potential episode on its own. So once I've done that, I've had closure. I don't have to think about it. It's not still in my head. It's done. Then I revolve around to, right, what's next? And that's just about being present again. It's right, it's done. I'm now, again, state scanning, and I'm on it again. I'm present again. So that, in a simple version, is the cycle, if you like, Stuart.
So obviously, in a game like golf, there's a time dimension to this. Yes. So there can be a period of time between action, i.e., shot, whatever it might be, and so obviously, the time in which you can go through this process, whether you're doing it yourself or with another, like a caddy or someone, obviously takes a bit of time. In a management context or a leadership context, again, you've probably got some time between the evaluation of the situation, the choice of action, the action, and then the review process that might last over even a week in some cases, depending on the nature of the task. But obviously, in a dynamic context, like say a team game, which is the one I operate in, this is a much more fluid process. It's not as so. Although obviously you've presented it separately, I know that from a in terms of its implementation in a live dynamic context, you recognize that it's not as if you're going to go through each process sequentially in a really rigid linear way. It's got much more dynamism in terms of its application, which is what I was referring to earlier on.
Yeah, it's now let's break that down. If we go back to the golf and the management for golf in particular, and I know from your experience in golf, where golf is hyper loaded is in pre-shot routine.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's very poor is post-shot routine. So what's important for golfers is that when they get to this cycle, and if I put up another little slide, if we go the right direction, here is the same process, but you see it in a cycle manner from a coaching point of view. So again, we could get into that later, but if we go back here, imagine that as a slide. Now, what we need to do, think of a golf player, what we don't want them to do is be walking down the course without concluding. What we want them to do is once they've completed the swing, they will know whether they committed or not. It's simple. You know if it's a yes, and if there's doubt, the chances are it's a no. And then we just get into literally while they're putting their club back in their bag, they're going and doing the reviewing choice execution if they've earned the right, and then it's done. Now they can walk down and have normal discussions. But what's really important is the golfers, what some golfers do is if they have high expectations and then the shot is not to their expectations, if we talk about it like that, what they'll do is they'll still be thinking about it for the walk down, and that could put them in a negative spiral. So it's really important to get the closure. If we look at that in management again, and we look at that in all realms of management, there will be times when this has to be fast in the moment. There will be times, as you say, where you say, right, let's collate that data. I'm going to do my little hot review on it. And I get all my corporates to do that in that moment. It might be a little voice message or a little note. And then I do a cold review, which may be on my own or with the team. And it's in that moment, that cold review, where we can share, right, what do we think from that? So a lot of it contextually, if we think about it in life, if we can look at this and go, actually, like you say, it's a new skill. So if we relate that back to golf or anything else, and golf's a great example of this, is to learn a swing. There's so many elements to a swing, right, Stuart? Crazy amount of elements. And if you just said, right, we're going to learn it all in a day, it's never going to happen. And it takes years and years and years. Now, if we look at this is, if we relate that to a golf swing, think of this as a golf swing is initially it's going to be bit clunky, and there's ways we can integrate this within even live sports and business and indeed golf, where we're saying we're in a learning phase now. This is a focus to learn this, and it may be clunky. Some people will go, I love this bit, I'm struggling with this bit. And we can talk in a bit about how a coach or a manager can use this to identify where an athlete or an employee is struggling. But what we're doing is we're saying, look, let's spend explicit time in learning this. And once we start to learn it, it starts to become natural. And as you've seen in the members area, there's videos of young kids doing this on a pitch, and it looks so flowing. It's so flowing because the coaches put in explicit time to say, we are going to learn the ARP and get the value of it and spend sessions just learning it with no pressure, as if it's a software skill that we talked about in previous episodes. So then it becomes, I've got to a point now, Stuart, and in fact, we had a review chat with one of my clients in America, and every single one of the coaches said, I don't remember how I coached before this, Mark. And because now this is my natural way of scanning, thinking and doing, reflecting, because now I can't not do it, if that makes sense. But initially it was horrendously clunky, and they identified where they were struggling. They identified where actually they're not as good as they thought they were in certain elements of this, even as a coach point of view.
Yeah. So part of the reason I was asking this question in terms of my context is obviously, as you know, I'm an ecological practitioner, but I incorporate PDS into my ecological practice. So if you like, I'm practicing ePDS. And obviously, one of the things I do is I don't always utilize an explicit framework like this. So the way I do this is that I will build it into the athlete vocabulary, so that they are, and I know this is something we're going to go on to, but you very much advocate that the athlete or the employee or whoever it is that you're leading on a journey of change, that they begin to learn and adopt this, and it becomes theirs more than it becomes ours. So obviously it works with coaches and it works in a coach development context as well. So if you were developing somebody, a manager, a leader, a coach of any kind, they can use this review to reflect on their own practice and their own behavior. And actually that in a coaching session, that's really good to do, because you've got the planning phase and the decision-making phase, you've got the execution phase, you've got the review phase, and this, that, and the other. But one of the things that you'll find when it comes to the athletes is that if the athletes own this, so they're managing state, they're doing their own scanning live in the moment, in the action, in the dynamic, etc. They're constantly referring to options and communicating options to each other. They're making live choices. They're committing for periods of time. In a training session, often you work in like a 5-minute shift and then you come back and do a bit of review. You then have a very brief moment for some review or even live review in the activity and in the game. So this process becomes really synergistic. And sometimes you're going from a review back straight to a choice, because the state and scanning bit's already sort of taken care of, and you know that they're doing that. You can see that it's observing and this, that, and the other. So you're going straight from review to choice, review to choice, review to choice, and then you go back, oh, state's dropped, let's come back to that, and you make them aware of that. So there's a sort of a dynamic flow to this that, well, certainly for me, that's how I kind of often execute this, because they're playing, they're doing it, and we haven't always got the time for me to necessarily stop things. So that's kind of what I was sort of referring to, I suppose.
So let's delve into that, because that's interesting take, and it's a common take. Well, there's so many elements to it from what you've just said there. So the first bit, let's start with, whatever style of coaching you're into, you can still use this. If someone says, I love drills, I need to tell them, you can still use
They don't exist, do they? Surely they don't exist.
Yeah. Well, in a spectrum of somewhere, light and shade. And you may have a coach goes, I never, ever want to say anything or give anyone an answer or anything. You can still use this. But the important part is we explicit teach this to everybody. This is not hidden. This is not something just the coaches use. The whole impact of PDS is everything's explicit. So what we do is we say, look, let's share this, because let's play devil's advocate with what you've said there of how you would use it, Stuart. We don't know. We might see them scanning, but we don't know what options have identified all the time. We see them committing to a choice. The problem with that is if I'm evolving someone in need-centered past where they are now, we may have somebody that continues to choose a similar choice, and it may be successful, but actually it's limited if we want to grow their game, if we're looking at in the sporting context or anywhere that makes a lot of decisions. So remember we did a podcast on your normal podcast channel, and you asked me, could you share how many interventions you've got? And I think I shared 7 or 11 interventions for a coach without stopping play. And this is where this comes in. So if we think of an example now, play's going on. I don't want to stop play. As much as I can, I want the play to be going with athletes making decisions. So what I do then is I'm now looking and I'm thinking, I think that person's scanned. I can see their heads moving around. Interesting. Why did they make that choice? Even if it came off or not interested. I'm interested in why they made the choice. I don't know. Now I'm guessing. So what I do is I just shout that player over is one of the interventions. And I just go, can you just review what happened over there? And immediately that athlete should be, now they may misstate, but they'll certainly be going for, right, this is what I saw. These were the options identified. And this is why I chose that one. And I wouldn't change a thing. I'd do it again. Now, by them saying this is what I saw, as a coach, without having to ask anything, I'm now listening and think, oh, you've missed something. You didn't see something. Or, yeah, you've seen it all. These were the options I identified. The players said that. And now I'm thinking, yeah, they're the options. Or, you didn't even see that as an option. So that may be a match IQ issue, because the scanning was good, but identifying that as an option. Or they've identified the options, but then they go, this is why I chose that. We're looking at influences. It's quite clear that's where their match IQ is missing. That's where they're struggling, because you're now listening to that and think, that's not good judgment. I can see where I need to support you. So then the coach can make a judgment on which interventions to use. Now they know where the source of that athlete's struggle is or limitation within growing their game. So this is where it can be used really well. Now you could just go, right, I'm seeing something, not sure. I shout the name because this has been trained and pre-agreed. Sarah, and then Sarah just goes, right option, right choice, and we haven't even pulled them over. Now, if you're going, yeah, love that, I agree. Or next time I'm going to go earlier on the right and they're still running past, that's all you go, great. Or you're thinking, not sure. Then you could call them over and go, can you just talk me through it? And then they would go through this process and you go, oh, this is where the breakdown is. This is where it is. Same token, Stuart, if someone's doing something particularly well and they're always down on themselves, use the same process. Go, can you just talk me through what happened there? And you go, and you go, no, just talk me through it. Well, this is what I saw. These were the options. This is why I chose that. Yeah, I committed to it. Yeah, I executed okay. And yeah, I wouldn't change a thing. And now you can go positive reinforcement. I said, I agree with what you said apart from how you said it. I thought that was fantastic. See what you've changed there. See what difference that made when you made that choice and committed to it. I love what you did there. Can you see the difference? So then we're helping those athletes that are always looking for the negative, always looking for the process. But actually, we're not taking over. We're still getting them to think through it. So can you see the subtleties, how you could break this down and use it in more ways than just a group stood there, stopping play and talking through it?
Yeah, exactly. And there's something in the members area that I picked up on. There's a really, really good video of this. There's a point of view camera of a player playing. They've clearly got like a GoPro on, and you hear them speaking to their teammates and using the ARP live. So they're asking their teammates to review live, and it doesn't take it. It's just a method of communication. And then they're just feeding back to each other all the time about the various things going on and the level of communication. And I think they might be like 10, 11, something like that. And the level of communication is, in my opinion, pretty unprecedented, because generally speaking, what you see with coaching is that, young people are unwilling to communicate to each other often. And a lot of the time it's because they haven't got a framework, and they also haven't recognized that it becomes an expectation because there's a framework to do it that means that you don't have to have conflict and ego and all of those sorts of things getting in the way. It's just a normalized process with a framework to use, and everybody expects that that's the way it's going to be done. It's really quite powerful.
And that's linking now to how this fits into the rule of three, because we've discussed before that great point you've made there, Stuart, we've discussed rule of three. And what you've shared there is rule of two. And this is, again, what we want to build, because a lot of teams, even the senior teams I've worked with, one of the challenges coaches have is, and in business, is some people don't like feedback from their peers. They see it as a finding fault. So we need a paradigm shift in, okay, what is success for us? Okay, so who have you got around you to help you be successful, that when they reach out to you, it's for them to understand how they can help you be better next time. So they may have done a pass or a move or a decision you thought, I wasn't ready for that. Or it may be, you've missed something there, let me help you identify it. But it's still using a player first, player last in that principle of, you've heard there. You haven't got players shouting and telling you need to go there next time. Because in essence, that's a bit like coach telling an athlete where they need to go this time. That's not really helping that athlete learn. For context is, okay, so why do I? Where are the options? But actually, by using this in that player first, player last, even a peer-to-peer, the ball's down. We know we've got a second of play. They can still scan off ball. But now there's a level of dialogue that's swift, of quality, and a language they understand that can get them to get to the conclusion in a collaborative, successful way. And also, you'll see other videos now, I don't know if you've got them to yet, Stuart, where people do this at rule of one. So literally, if they've recognized that actually they did something exceptionally well, you'll see them recognize that show. Or if they feel actually they made the wrong choice in reflection, you'll see them put a hand up and say what the choice should have been. So they won't share the problem. They'll share the next time solution, so their teammates can hear that and go, great, love that. I don't even have to ask you. I know now you know next time, which is a serious confidence builder. Important to connect with, Stuart, as well. Those videos that you're watching in the members area, they are not set up. They are from raw recordings of normal training sessions. These aren't, you say this, I say that. And that's Evo Soccer, Evo Rugby in Sheffield. You want to see the senior teams now that are moving up the leagues. They're now in professional leagues, and it's phenomenal. But it's phenomenal because they're starting that with their 7, 8-year-old kids and building this in to become natural process of thinking in and outside the sport.
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting because what you're doing here is the sort of the human dynamics element. So it's a framework to enable the human dynamics. So obviously the ecological approach is about the environment, and it's about being aware of the sources of information available that will help us to be able to guide action and coordinate action. But you still need to coordinate that. You still need to verbalize that to individuals. Because if somebody observes, for example, that the opposition are doing something or mobilizing in a particular way, you have to be able to react to that. And it's the same in a business context. You know, if you notice, for example, that a colleague is doing something that, you know, might be detrimental or something along those lines, you've got to find the way of engaging with that. You know, even though that they might be 100% think that they're doing the right thing. One question I had for you though, oh, and by the way, yeah, in those videos, it's really obvious to me that communication and the method of communication is really impactful. And like you say, it does build a lot of confidence. Now, the one bit that's interesting to me though is it does take a while, I imagine. If I found this to be true, to build the kind of culture where people accept this readily. And I'm thinking about some of the workplaces that I consult to, where in actual fact, there is quite a significant amount of animosity. There's quite a significant amount of competitiveness, and that's driven by some of the economic imperatives built in, bonus systems and things like that, where people don't readily communicate with each other because they see that as an opportunity cost. You know, if I communicate something to somebody else and it helps them do their job better, that's a potential loss to me. Now, you could argue that there are some downsides to having those kinds of bonus systems that make people be combative against each other and competitive. However, if that's the way the business works and that's what's been successful for that business, you're not necessarily going to want to change that. What we're going to try and do is change the human dynamics within it. And there's a lot of other competitive environments in a sporting context that are similar. So I wonder if you could just expand on this notion of how you look at some of those cultural dynamics and still embed these ideas and bring them in.
Well, let's start with the obvious, is that if you're changing culture stems by changing the way people see and think about things and changing their behavior. It all stems from that. So any culture change is tough. Any culture change takes some really effective and robust adherence strategies to support and embed the change. And that's most of my work, is embedding the support for change, the behavioral change. All these do is align to, and if you go back even to the episodes we've covered already, we've talked about what excellence actually is. We've talked about what the lighthouse and success is. We've talked about being selfish and selfless and understanding what that means, and how as managers and leaders, we need to be the role models of that. We need to be self-aware and accurate in our self-awareness of where our work-ons are, and literally project that to the people we're working with, to be the role models in reality. But also understand if our parameters of what success is, our measures, are making people only independent and not interdependent, our measured success that we're promoting as carrots are ineffective to drive the behaviors that we want to build the culture we need. So I do a lot of work with businesses and sport, more businesses, because I think although elite sport, there are some drives to be top of the table, you know, the money, etc., the media hype, hire and fire. But particularly in businesses, they're so caught up on traditional, or how can I get my my manager or sub manager to work hard? Well, let's give a bonus if they get so many sales, or they do this. But what they're not being smart about is go, well, what type team do you want to build? And when they look at that, so okay, so do your bonuses and incentives align to the type of behavior you want to flourish in your organization? If they don't, you need to change them without eliminating them, but are they fit for purpose? And this is where I get a no, they're not, Mark, but we're not sure of what is. And that's when we have to go through that journey. And again, it's human change. I'd say the toughest crowd for me has been some schools I've gone into, where I think it's the toughest dynamic to change in sports in schools. Would you have an idea of why they're so much tougher than professional sports or community sports or business, where there's a bit of a perfect storm in challenges in schools?
So parental expectation and the need for results.
Well, both of those, yes. What I've noticed is the big difference where challenge can occur. If you're in business or you're in an elite sport, use those two for example, it is results driven at some way. Now we can go, well, what are the facilitators of that? We go, I'm paying you to get results. So therefore, hey, you don't get the results and either train you up or get rid of you or move you somewhere else. Same as in sport. In community, the coaches a lot there aren't doing it for the money, but actually their community club is based on people turning up, volunteering, players, kids, parents to drop their kids off, and the kids keep coming back. School, you're paid. Apart from a few schools, you're still paid even if you don't win championships or cups. But the kids turn up because they have to turn up. It's not like voluntary. So when you're looking at that, for a teacher, for someone external like Crazy Mark or anyone to come in, that often, like traditional in business, and we've spoke about already, is someone might come in for a training day and they go, oh, that was really interesting. And I might do a little bit, but I'll forget about it in 3 weeks. Oh, what was that we did? So they'll stay in their comfort zones. But obviously, when you got someone like me coming in, and obviously there's many versions of me around the world, is where we say, no. If we're coming in, why are we coming in? And if we're running some delivery, we need to go, well, if we're seeing a value on it, how are we going to embed it? Let's put a support structure in place. Let's agree what you're going to commit to. And then I hold them accountable. But often you'll find in some of those situations, people won't commit to what they say. And then it becomes discomfort. Because if you look at the parameters, well, I'm still being paid. The kids are still turning up. Hey, so that as constraints of where are we, what is success, can be a little bit mixed up in some schools. Now, you will have teachers in schools and some schools that are all over this and they're going, this is fantastic. But you'll also have some where you're going, well, no, I'm fine as I am. So why don't I'll nod, but I'm not going to do anything. And then I can quite happily come up with the excuse why I haven't done it or committed to it. And then, oh, it didn't work, but did you commit to it? Well, yeah, but no, blah, blah, blah. So if you're looking at it as the most difficult environments to build the culture and the change, I'd say that particular area, is the toughest in my experience out of all the areas I've worked in.
It's interesting you mentioned that. So the philosopher in me now, looks at that and sees that as a whole series of misaligned incentives. So you've got individuals who, for example, have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo, and they also have very little incentive to improve, because actually, why would they? Because there's not really any reason to do that apart from the need to get results. So you can imagine if there's an organization that wasn't particularly getting results, they might be interested. But organizations that are traditionally doing that, well, why would they? The other thing I was thinking about when you were saying that as well is that this is a particular type of school that you're referring to, I'm assuming. They're always outwardly talking about well-being, athlete well-being. But I've noticed in some of my conversations with some of similar sort of environments where there seems to be a big misalignment between their outward projections of what they're all about in terms of athlete well-being or student well-being and holistic development and all those sorts of things, and then practice, because this circles just right back to episode 1, this notion of winning well. Because I think what we're talking about here, whether it's business, school, club, whatever it is whenever the focus becomes purely and simply about outcome, which is why performance is a behavior, not an outcome. When it becomes about outcome, you start to see all of these different sort of maladaptive behaviors emerging. And, this goes right back to some of the performance realm, where the focus just becomes about on, kind of winning the medal or the cup or the shield or the whatever it is. And the behavior of the humans changes. And I see this in community sport as well. When the minute it's about a shield or a cup or a tournament, all of a sudden the behaviors of adults, whether it's coach or spectator or parent, they all change. And it's funny how those environments do foster certain behaviors, and I could understand why those cultural challenges. The bit I took away from what you were saying there was, you mentioned the rule of three, and just to sort of do a quick teach back on the rule of three in case people don't know how, are coming to this late. The rule of three is basically, I see that as like an ownership framework where we're the first level, the rule of one, is where the athlete is self-reviewing, self-identifying, and acknowledging that they've sort of moved away from the agreed set of parameters that we've established around how they're going to behave and how they're going to act and the things they're going to do, the tasks they're going to perform. The second one is when the peer notices and asks the other individual to review what they're doing and this, that, and the other. That's rule of two. And rule of three is then when the leader, coach, teacher, whoever the facilitator is, begins to step in to remind the individuals about their responsibilities, or whether they are in the state that they were looking for and they're delivering against those sorts of parameters that have been pre-agreed. So that's the rule of three, but that's a tool, that's a building block. The ARP is a building block. And the bit that I just took away from what you were saying there is that these tools, whether it's UAEs, rule of three, ARP, all these sorts of things, are building blocks that then aggregate up to a change of culture. So you don't necessarily need the culture to be right to embed these ideas. What you do is you begin to embed these ideas, and then the culture dynamically shifts in a direction, hopefully in a more positive direction than the one you're currently in.
Yeah, 100%. These are facilitators to optimum performance and wellness. If you think about it, we've just talked about the action review there. The rule of one itself is living that action review process towards your purpose, your lighthouse, based on your needs, from getting up in the bed in the morning to, whatever you're doing, the choices you're making in life, interacting with certain people, same process working through. Rule of two, now we're saying, okay, now I'm doing one, but now how can I help my peers? Well, again, the action review process is going to help you understand, as opposed to just tell people what to do, is I need to understand why you're thinking and what you're doing that way. And now I can support you. Or you're killing yourself, you're actually doing really well. Let me share with you why. And then that rule of three is at all times, they can all reach out for help if they can't fix it, from 2 and 1 and 3. So that 3 is actually, no, you're not self-managing, I need to intervene, or you're struggling to find the solution. Let me put an intervention in without taking over that's going to help you raise your awareness to provide the solution on the journey. So that organicness is the facilitators to driving the behaviors to building the culture. And this is where I think years ago, Stuart, when we chatted, I don't know if you remember, we had, I think it was PBNO golf. I think Wayne, it was the first golf chap that introduced us, I believe, through PBNO and then through to you all those years ago. And when we first had the chat, one of the things that you really connected with, and you said that you liked, is the fact of what you're doing is you're building a framework that glues everything together to allow people to enhance themselves. And, if you simplified it, that's what it is. It's about saying, no, not keep driving these markers. Are the markers fit for purpose? But the facilitator markers are behaviors. So do we know how to invest in them to give people the support and the clarity that they need and challenge to build the very behaviors that allow them to be effective? And then if it's a team organization in business, in anything, how do we know to build that interdependency? So we're not building just funnels, we're building it, but we're building it from the bottom and the top at the same time. We're not saying it's top down. We're not saying it's bottom up. We go, no, we all start together. This is inclusive journey. And the principles we're using, we're going to commit them to them together and share our vulnerability together, irrelevant of the hierarchy we're in. And that's when it becomes very powerful.
Yeah. And at that point about hierarchy is a really important one, because that's one of the things I really, really like about this is that because you're investing a lot of you're supporting your athlete, peer, employee with the tools to self-review and to manage their own kind of journey of development, and we're pre-agreeing what that looks like, and we're doing all those sorts of things. The level of ownership is just through the roof. And from a management perspective or a leadership perspective, coaching perspective, what you find happens is you have just way less stress. So it's an investment initially, because becoming more familiar with this approach and then enabling others to become more familiar with the approach does take some time, and it takes an investment. And I think that's where probably a lot of people fall down. But what it pays you back is just off the scale, because you're no longer firefighting. You're no longer having to manage all these different situations and deal with all these conflict points and having to step in all the time and go, we've said this before, why isn't this happening, and all those sorts of things. You don't have to get like that. You get a situation where the athletes, employees, individuals are constantly, they're doing it themselves to a certain extent. And then you're just nudging and guiding and reminding and sometimes then taking it in a slightly different direction or and all those sorts of things. And so from a kind of day-to-day operational perspective, your life just becomes a whole lot easier. And then you can focus on the things that you need to focus on, which is direction, which is strategy, which is observing things and seeing what's going on, and then putting the communication in. And so I think a lot of practitioners, leaders and all that sort of stuff, they're so busy solving problems on the day-to-day. And I see this on a daily basis in a number of the places that I'm consulting to. And they're so busy solving problems that they never really get the opportunity to think about direction. And so then the reason that's really dangerous in a business context is you're then at the mercy of the winds of change. So if there's a shift in, the business landscape because suppliers change, or there's a supply chain problem, or one of your work providers, for example, decides they're not going to, what you could usually see is you could have spotted that ahead of time, and it hits you, and then you're in reaction mode, and then you're in panic mode, and then you might have to look at layoffs or whatever it might be. Happens all the time. Same thing happens in a sport context. You're on the sideline sometimes. Something different happens. The team you're playing does something differently, and you're powerless to change it because the group can't self-adapt live in the moment. And you start shouting instructions and making substitutions, and you do all these different things. It's too late. It's already begun. These things are so powerful in terms of being able to manage performance, have groups of individuals working to a common purpose, self-evaluating, constantly reviewing, peer support, driving improvement. And it means then that the organization becomes really, really resilient to these winds of change, whether it's a sporting context or a business context.
And that's where the solution-based approach in a preventative way, not a cure way, comes in. So many managers contact me initially when they go, I have incompetence, and sometimes I use that word, sometimes I don't, with certain individuals. I'm spending a lot of time doing their job for them. But when you start scanning, okay, well, how are you managing that person? That they've now built a limiting belief in that department or that person. So what we're not doing preventative work. We'll go, actually, well, what structures have you put in a way to help them make good judgment? What confidence have you given them in their permissions? And what tool have you given them where they can quantify what they did and why they did? So now you've got this stretch where, okay, yeah, I'm micromanaging now, and I can't just step away because I'm not confident to. Okay, so how do you know how to make those steps and still building the confidence and building theirs? They go, hey, boss, trust me now. And not, well, there's no point in me making a decision because the boss is just going to rip me apart. So I won't make decisions. Boss, tell me what you want me to do. And now the vicious cycle is there. So things like these, there's elements we haven't shared yet that I'm sure we'll share as we go. But fundamentally, I put these in early on and they never change. That's the beauty. They're timeless. But what you'll find is you can use them in so many areas. An example would be in business when you have a weekly catch-up meeting. Instead of going around the room and, a guy stood at the front asking a lot of questions, we can just go department and they can work using the action review process. Share, right, okay, so I can quantify and qualify why we came to these decisions. These are the influencers. These are elements we don't know. We need your support in. Influencers could be budget, seasonal, time frames, risk, reward in business. So now the boss can go, actually, now you've shared that with me. Now I have a better understanding of what you're dealing with in the department. Thank you. Okay, let me add this, or let me share this information. Great, thanks. Now I've got that, boss. This is our direction. This is my suggestion. So all of a sudden, there's real texture to getting to the point really quick. And for me, I think the biggest game changer in the action review process for a coach, for a business, a leader, a manager, a department manager, is for them and captains on the pitch or court in players, is to identify the source of where the breakdown is and put an intervention in that isn't taking over. The intervention is filling the gap to allow them now to connect to the next stage. And this is what the action review process does so well. We're not guessing why was there a problem. Great example, even in elite sport, international level, can't mention teams. But I'd say with 3 of the last international teams I worked with, the issues they had was the coach was looking at the outcome. They were seeing a constant, like the defense line was being broken or someone was scoring. So what they did was they said, actually, they don't know this tactic. So we're going to spend more time on this tactic, whether it's a defensive tactic, midfield, whatever, mid-court. But actually, when I asked them, well, what's the source? So you're saying the tactic's not working, the opposition is breaking you down. Where is the source? And they couldn't answer. Go, okay, well, let's use the action review process, put the video up. Okay, where are you seeing? What questions have you asked these players on one-to-one videos? And when they've recorded the video of the one-to-ones, it's pretty much the coach being dominant. They might have asked a question, but then they're directing and yes, great athlete, but see this, as opposed to saying, talk to me about that. Talk me through it now. And the athlete actually saying on that one-to-one video, right, at the time, this is what I saw. I'm seeing something different on the video now because it's from a different angle. But at the time, this is what I saw. These were the options identified, and this is why I went for that. Now the coach has got data they never had where they go, okay, so it's this. It may be, I didn't realize that 6 foot tall person was stood to your left and you didn't see our winger free. But the video, I can see it, or I was stood in the stand, I can see it. So there's many variables that this allows people to grow with. And what we're not doing is we're not taking the ownership away from that athlete, that manager, that department. What we're saying is you still own this. I'm the guide now of the big vision. I can support the gaps, but let me explore and find out where the gaps are. So now I can support you in them or direct you to where you can self-manage and fix those gaps. But also, when you're self-critical, I can get you to identify what the things you're doing so well that you may have missed, that you haven't realized you're doing so much better just because you haven't seen an outcome performance yet. But actually look at what you're doing better now. It's going to come.
I remember one of your clients working internationally using the action review process and discovered through the action review process with the athlete. I remember him saying this distinctly in the room. He went, I had this like horrible sinking feeling in my stomach because I realized he doesn't understand the tactic.
Yeah.
He hadn't seen it because he doesn't understand the tactic. And it was only through the action review, because all of that, question, get it, all that sort of stuff. And then came to the action and it was doing something completely different. Couldn't understand why. And the action review was they just perceived the information in an entirely different way. So the communication had been made, but the person hadn't learned. And so that was the action review process. And that's the power of it is, because it's a genuine two-way dialogue and it's not just a question of passive athlete going, yes, boss, I know what you're saying, because they're afraid of if they say no, they'll look silly and they'll get deselected or whatever it might be. The action review process actually surfaces important information and insights that then leader, manager, coach can use to then adjust the strategy, the tactics, and then enable that individual to perform. And fundamentally, it wasn't that individual's fault that they weren't performing. Classically, people go, well, that's an error. That's a system error. No. That was an error on behalf of the coach who hadn't ensured that the individual understood their role in the system in these situations, because systems only work if the people who are executing them actually know what's going on.
And that example is no of the other coaches spotted it. They were still looking at blame. They were still looking, we need to do this again and again. And it was only, you know, when we went through this with that coach, and then he looked back at the same video, goes, oh my God, the light bulb went off, goes, this is what I've been doing. No wonder. But the point, I mean, that was a great example where it was an international match, and that very element lost them the match. That one thing. And everyone's now on blame, as opposed to, well, hang on a minute, where was the source of that? Because sometimes you'll just lose a game and there's no one's fault. It's just one of those things. But if you can identify, actually, that's something I need to do better as a coach. It's not doing more tactics. It's not doing more drills. It's not doing more technical on this element. There's an understanding issue that I didn't give the athletes the freedom and the pressure load in, not in short-term recall, but in game situation, to test where the weak links were. Now I've got data, so now I can build that. But actually, I need them to know how to quantify and qualify the choices and execution they're making, not think, what does coach want to hear now? Not listen to coach checking up another video on the board. Same as in business and management. Managers I've seen real lose it because they go, I've told you already, in this situation, you need to do that. And it's black and white and so clear to the boss's head. And the person's thinking there and go, okay, yeah. And they're walking out and go, I still don't agree, or I still don't understand it. Or actually, I am doing it.
Or I don't know how to do it.
Yeah. Or they think
I haven't got the skill.
Yeah. But they think sometimes they think they're doing it, but because we've not taught them the variables, they're just going, well, boss wants me to do this. But what they haven't understood is, well, hang on, there's some options here. What's influencing your choice? I have no idea because the boss just tells me to do this. Okay, well, this is where the weak link is. So let's share with you an understanding of the influences to allow you to make the choice. And let me give you permission. These choices you can make without me. If it comes to this choice, just give me a heads up, a quick phone call. I'm in this situation. Use the action review process. I want to make this choice. You said to check with you first. You're okay with that, boss? Yes, I'm okay with that. Later down the line, you can do all of them. You don't need to check with me. And that's that sliding scale of ownership we talk about.
Yeah. And there's a important point there, which is, and this is something to probably pick up on. We haven't even touched this, so we'll pick up on it in the next episode, which is about actually talking through the what ifs. You know, because actually you might agree to a course of action, but in the dynamics of, you know, day-to-day business life, day-to-day sporting matches, whatever it might be, things change. And so you have to work through what some of those parameters are and what ifs are. You don't want individuals having to always refer to the boss to make the decision. But again, there may be times when that is appropriate because this is a brand new situation. But generally speaking, if you've worked through the what ifs, you've got a really empowered employee, an empowered athlete who's making decisions live, know what they're doing, have a real clarity, they can really perform. And if they're looking to the sideline, or they're ringing up or asking for questions and going upstairs to see what does the boss say, then, you know, that's not really a person who's can make live decisions. It's not a really efficient or effective workforce. What if the boss isn't there? Does everything grind to a halt? So these are problems that some people exist. The other thing I was just going to quickly say, and I think this is something that's really important, is a lot of what you talked about there around, you know, people asking for permission, so to speak, and those dynamics, and people agreeing and nodding because they're fearful of suggesting that they don't understand because it would make them look like they're not competent enough, and they might either get deselected or fired or put on a performance review program or whatever that might be. And that's a lot about psychological safety, and a lot spoken about psychological safety, particularly in the sports world, and this idea of creating a culture with psychological safety. It's a bit of a nebulous idea, but I also think the fact that we talk about psychological safety is, for me, a really strong indicator of the fact that there is a problem within an environment and within a culture. And often the problem isn't necessarily because people are evil or mean, or like they just haven't got a framework to communicate with individuals that enables them to be empowered and to have a robust and, well, you know, a kind of a decent dialogue around how we need to solve these different problems. People don't feel empowered. They don't feel like they've got you know, the right to have those sorts of conversations, to say openly, actually, I'm not sure about that. just explain that again for me, or I'm not sure about that, or what happens if this situation happens? Oh, okay. So, and if you've got that kind of genuine open dialogue, so those individuals are beginning to sort of like self-manage, self-direct, self-organize under constraints, which is a big part of the ecological approach, and where there's lots of synergy. If you've got that, you've got a really, really like high-performing team, high-performing individual athletes, high-performing individuals within organizations, high-performing business. And those people, they feel whatever psychologically safe means, because you've built this dialogue framework. You've given people the tools to have that conversation. You've been clear about expectations. You've set the UAEs. You've been really honest with each other about what you expect, what they expect from you, what you expect from them. That's where psychological safety comes from. It comes from these ingredients and tools, frameworks, methods for communication. It's not an idea that you're going, right, we're going to do some psychological safety workshop today, or we're going to, it's just not that, right? So I just want to say performance cultures are based on some of these fundamental basics and building blocks. And I'm saying performance in any context. It can be performance in a really small community context. It can be performance in a higher context. And actually, I've got a really difficult conversation this evening where there's some people in my community club, recreational people, who are really unhappy with some decisions that have been made. And some of that's because there hasn't been this sort of dialogue in place. Yeah. And I'm going to be using some of this when I go into that really tough steel cage death match of a meeting this evening with a load of well-meaning volunteers.
There's some critical markers in what you've just said there, and some texture elements as well. The first one, the critical marker, is if you're the boss or the one that's managing that scenario, you've got to honor. So if someone says, coach, I don't understand this, or boss, no, I'm still not sure, you can't then just go, well, you just need to do this. You've got to now honor your part. And the beauty of it is when there's texture, initially, if someone says, I've never said to the boss in a meeting, oh, I don't quite agree with that, boss, or I'm not sure about that. And now this is the first time I'm going to say it. That boss needs to go, I need to honor, I need to be my excellence right now. So the first time someone does it, that boss has to be going, okay, well, let's talk through it. What don't you understand? Or talk me through what you're seeing. So now they can use the action review. Well, boss, this is what I'm seeing. This is what we're working with. These are the only options I'm seeing. Here's the problem with those options. Here's the impactors. So this is why in that situation, I'm preferring this one. So now the boss is going, right, you're owning this, but you've given me something to really have a discussion about that I may not even been aware of, because you're the specialist in that area. I'm just big picture here. The detail you're going to have, I may not have. The texture would be is when someone, the boss is going to everyone clear, and someone isn't clear, then they're proactive in that. So they go, I think I'm clear, boss, or I'm not sure. Can I work a scenario through with you? And then they use the action review. Says, right, this is a situation. Let me take you through how I'm seeing it. And they use the action review process. And then you go, okay, are you seeing any different, boss, or am I missing something? So straight away now they're being proactive in sharing the data to help the clarity process. And I think the third element for that is it's something I still need to get better at and I have improved, but I'm still on a mission to get better. There's often I'll go into organizations and they'll go, yeah, we're transparent, Mark. Yeah, you can challenge me. Yeah, if we don't, agree or we're not sure, we'll ask. And I, as you know, my delivery is all about interaction and going, come on, challenge me. I'm good. Fine. What do you think? But there's still times when people are still not being honest with me. They're going, yeah, I've got it. Yeah, we're up for this. This is great. And then they're wandering away and they're not doing it. But one of the reasons I'm doing it is they weren't seeing the value of it, or they just felt, oh, you were coming on a bit too strong there, Mark. This is too much for me on this process. So it's difficult because you can't always read the room from first impact, first intervention, because some people put on a face, especially new, etc. So sometimes it takes time before you've gone, right, I'm stepping away now, I'm scanning. Okay, the behaviors aren't aligned to what was agreed. Now we have that firm, fair and friendly conversation to explore in an inquisitive way. Okay, what were the barriers? Remind me what we agreed, not in a telling off way, but what's prevented it now? Was it me? Did I not sell it well enough? Was it a lack of understanding? Were there things, obstacles that you weren't aware of? Did you reach out when you saw an obstacle like we agreed? Let's find out what it is. This is not a telling off, it's an exploration right now. And still at that point, some people still won't be honest. You'll get more, but sometimes it takes a bit longer. So I need to find a way to accelerate that. And it may be I can't. It may be, there's so many dynamics and I'm not with them 24/7. I'm still a stranger coming in, that it does take that time before people go, oh, I can say what I think and no one's going to think bad of me, or no one's going to be in a huff for the next week or not speak to me, which happens in some of the environments I'm going into. People literally hate each other, but they're working in the same department and everyone knows, but no one's dealing with it, Yeah.
And also remember, there's people who've got that sort of cognitive dissonance where, on a conceptual level, yes, bought in, but then their own sort of personality is such that they just can't follow through, and they require quite a lot of work because they have to change who they are. But I'm conscious we're up on time, and this I think is a part 2, because you've just alluded to, I think one of the things I found most powerful in the latest module was there's a particular slide with a load of different questions that you can ask. I think they're really useful, and I think we should come on to that. So I think we're probably going to do ARP part 2 in the next episode, because I think some of those dynamics are interesting for us to unpick. Right. So before we wrap up, before Christmas, you promised that, well, not promised, but you announced that there was we were doing a big kind of giveaway competition. Remind everybody of what that involves, and then and then we can tell everybody how they can enter.
So we had, this is going to test my recall on what percentages they were now, but the first prize that we will pull out of the hat on our next chat in 2 weeks' time is a free one-to-one Zoom with me on any area of performance, mentoring that you'd like, business, education, sport, makes no difference. Plus that person, it was either 90 or 95% off the members area. Do you remember which one it was?
Yeah, I'll put it up in the transcript.
Okay. And then the runners up will get I believe it was 75% off the members area. And so long as you stay a member, you get that for life. It's not like you just get that for the first year. You're stuck with that unless you decide to not stay a member anymore. So the things you need to do in order to get an opportunity, and obviously this is going to be far easier to win than Neo May's house that I've never won so far, and I do my £10 a month. I'm still hopeful, but you never know, is you need to do 3 elements. So first is subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already, and subscribe to my website, pdscoaching.com. And then there's another element, Stuart, and what is it they need to type into underneath this in the comments?
I'm just going to put it up on the screen now. Bear with me. Here you go. So you need to subscribe to Mark's website, pdscoaching.com, and subscribe to the YouTube channel and type "count me in" the comments below. And then we're going to announce the winner on the next show, which will be the 22nd of January.
Yes. And as you see when you're listening through this, the over 100, I don't think there is another resource, and every member that's been on there that's given feedback is another resource that's the level of depth that this members area is when it comes to need-centered coaching, when it comes to the software to enhance you as a manager, a leader, a teacher, and a coach, and even develop great decision makers and teams. So I am not selling it well enough, I've been told, but get inside there, explore it. But it is years and years of resources and support. Where are you, Stuart, in just the action review process chapter, which I think has got 16 lessons in it, which is just one of many?
So I've got about halfway through, I think, in the time since the last episode into this episode. Some of them are not quite nice. They're punchy and short, and you can get into them, and there's some videos, and I think the videos are really powerful. They really bring it to life, and you can really see how it works. And for me, practically, and also being relatively visual in my kind of learning outlook, it really was useful to see the theory of it actually applied in context. And there's a really nice one that really jumps out at me, which is where the coach has the players doing their action review on his performance and then him self-reviewing. And I mean, that's just one of the most powerful things I've seen. And from a kind of play their way, children's rights, children's voice perspective, it's a really, really good model of how coaches can create that brilliant dynamic environment with their athletes.
And that's a big shout out to Evo Soccer that's been living this now, and they're global. But all of those videos are raw footage of actual training sessions and matches. They are not set up for the purposes of the membership area. So that is real. They are real kids, real coaches living that every single week, which is what culture is about, right? It's about living it.
100%. Mark, really enjoyed this one. I've enjoyed working through the sessions during my downtime. What we pre-agreed as acceptable was for me to just go through lesson 1, but I tried to strive for exceptional and went into sort of 6 lessons, I think, with comments under each one, which would be pretty good. So we're making progress, but I do still need to finish those off, and I do want to come back in our next episode to do a little bit of a recap on where we got to with those with that, because there's definitely some of the bits and pieces of nuggets that I want to be able to draw out for people. I think are really useful.
Awesome. Thanks, Stuart. We shall see you soon.